Part 87. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 863. Chi Heiran nodded his wish. He also felt that Mu Yangling was very lenient with the children in their studies. Although he was not a master who loved to study when he was a child, it didn't mean that he hoped that his son would not like to study either. Chi Heiran got the imperial edict, and when he returned home, he was confident. He told little Xiang about the thunderbolt with his hands behind his back. You all have to go to the palace to study when you reach the age of 5, none of you can escape. Xiao Xia was overjoyed and asked, his fourth uncle, Xiaoan also wants to study in the palace. Chi Heiran nodded, the emperor said that the gentlemen in the palace are better. When you come back from Guangdong, Xiaoan will just be able to enroll. Being able to enter the palace to study, the son's relationship with the royal family will be one step closer, and Xiao Xia can't help but smile. Xiaoan was not happy about it. Although he is a genius, geniuses are also fun. He can study for 5 days and rest for 2 days. Why should he go to the palace to study? So he shouted, I won't go to the palace, fourth uncle, I won't go to the palace to study, so I will study with Mr. Yuan. The tiger head and the little lion also became nervous, and they understood that there was still their business involved, so they rushed to the front of their mother and asked, Mother, do we also want to go to the palace to study? That's what your father meant. Then we have to get up before dawn like big brother. Mu Yangling nodded heavily. The twins looked at each other, burst into tears with a wow, turned around and threw themselves into Chi Heiran's arms, crying, I don't want to enter the palace, Dad, we don't want to enter the palace. Xiaoan also burst into tears, and threw herself into Chi Heiran's arms. The 3 little ones cried so loudly that the house almost collapsed. Xiao Xia was at a loss, she didn't expect her son to be so repulsive about entering the palace to study. Obviously he used to have fun with His Highness the Crown Prince when he entered the palace. Chi Heiran claims to be a strict father, but he has always been responsive to the children's requests. Compared with Mu Yangling, when the children have requests, they prefer to ask Chi Heiran, because he usually agrees, and he will do what he promises. So now that he was hugged and cried by the 3 children, he couldn't harden his heart at once. He was a little helpless and asked Mu Yangling for help. Xiao Xia, who was still flustered at first, felt happy, saying that the fourth uncle was a god of killing, but now it seems that he is not at all like a decisive general. Mu Yangling's face turned cold, he raised his head and said to Chi Heiran, you are not allowed to control them, just let them cry, if there is a request, they will not give reasons, but if they persuade us with the facts, they will only cry. If we want to cry, we have to agree to them. Let them cry. The voice is neither loud nor low, but it can be heard by everyone in the room. The little bear, who was about to cry because of grievance, stopped the tears at once. The 6-year-old child already understands the stakes. He knows that unless the mother agrees, otherwise, even what the father promised, the mother can overturn it. Chi Heiran pursed his lips slightly, but sure enough he stopped coaxing the children. Xiaoan was the smartest. With tears all over his face, he looked up at his fourth uncle, then looked back at his fourth aunt, then grabbed the little lion who had stopped sobbing and the tiger head who closed his eyes and howled dryly, and said, Don't cry, let's go please fourth aunt, fourth uncle can't be the master. He taught Hutu a lesson again, you have to cry like a cry. What's the matter if you can't shed tears? Hutu rubbed his head and said, I think the dim sum in the palace is also very good, and the food is also delicious, better than home. Chi Heiran moved his hand, but still didn't pull it up, but the little lion did what his father wanted to do, slapped Hutu's head with a slap, and said seriously, Brother, you have to listen to Brother Xiaoan and go to the palace to study. Not only do we have to get up early, we can't rest, and we can't go to the street to play. Xiaoan nodded repeatedly at the side, you have to listen to us, if we tell you to cry, you can cry and shed tears. Huda thought this was a little difficult, so the little lion threatened him with his afternoon tea, if you don't shed tears when you cry, I won't give you any more of my snacks, and I won't give you brother Zioan's either. Hutioyu felt that it was not difficult now, he nodded repeatedly, patted his chest and said, no problem, I will definitely shed tears. Chi Heiran turned his head and asked Mu Yangling and Xiao Xia, do they think we can't hear their whispers? Xiao Xia coughed lightly, feeling that Chi Heiran was too fussy with the child. Little Xiang was already sitting on the side covering his face. He felt that his younger brothers were so stupid, but he could only hope that his younger brothers could persuade his mother, otherwise, he would have to go to the palace to study. Only Mu Yangling sat on it and watched the three little heads gather together to discuss without interrupting them or reminding them. After the discussion between the three, everyone unanimously decided that Zioan would be the main negotiator to negotiate with the adults, while the little lion would be the assistant, and the tiger head would be the supporter. After discussing the matter, the three children stood in front of Mu Yangling. Zioan and Mu Yangling reasoned, my aunt said that we are children, and children mainly play happily, grow happily, and study happily, but when we enter the palace, we will be happy. I'm not happy anymore, so you can't send us into the palace. Mu Yangling and Chi Heiran raised their eyebrows at the same time, looking at Xiaoan happily in their hearts, very good, at such a young age, they can refute adults with what adults have said. Xiao Xia was even more astonished, she stared blankly at her son. Xiaoan never revealed this in front of her, he would only tell him what interesting game he played with the tiger-headed little lion brothers. The fourth aunt told them nice story, played fun games with them, he never asked her for anything. Mu Yangling has always told her that Xiaoan is very smart. She thought that this smartness was only in reading and literacy. At this time, she deeply felt how smart her son is. Compared to Mu Yangling, she gave little education to her children, so she was sitting here, did he still choose to fight with Mu Yangling? Xiao Xia looked at Mu Yangling, she wanted to see how she would deal with her son. Why are you unhappy when you enter the palace? The prince brother has been studying in the palace, isn't he always happy? Xiaoan tilted his head, and said with some uncertainty, because the elder brother of the prince has always had a rest every 10 days, he is used to it, but we are not used to 2 rests every 5 days. Mu Yangling smiled and said, habits can be changed and developed. You used to only eat and sleep, but when you grow up, you can crawl, walk, and run, and then you learn to play besides eating and sleeping. Until now you have to study when you grow up, and when you grow up, the task of study will naturally be heavy, and the habits will naturally change, you can't take 5 days and 2 days off forever. Xiaoan pointed at Xiao Xiang and said, but brother Xiao Xiang only entered the palace when he was 6 years old, why should we be 5 years old? Mu Yangling asked with a smile, so wait until you are 6 years old. Xiaoan bit his finger, he felt wrong, he was led into the pit by his fourth aunt. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 864. Huda shouted in time, no. Mu Yangling turned to him and asked, why? Huda said anxiously, we want to grow taller, we still have to play, there is no time. Xiaoan instantly adjusted his strategy and gave the little lion a wink. The little lion immediately stopped the tiger head, and the tiger head immediately closed his mouth. We grow taller, so we have to sleep 5 hours a day, 4 at night and 1 at noon, so that we can grow tall and strong. Xiaoan looked up at her aunt and confirmed with her. When Mu Yangling saw that he was sincerely looking into her eyes, she immediately smiled. It was only once in a while that she could express her sincerity by looking directly into the other person's eyes when she asked for something to talk to. She didn't expect this child to remember it. She rubbed his hair and said encouragingly, my aunt said that. Xiaoan was shocked, and continued, fourth aunt, if we want to be happy when we grow up, we must play, and we can't spend all our time on study. If we go to the palace to study, we won't have time to play, and we will be unhappy. Of the three children including Xiao Xiang nodded fiercely, they would all be unhappy. And didn't you say that growing up is not only as simple as learning book knowledge, but also learning how to be a person, a friend, and a son? You can learn these things in the palace, Mu Yangling said, His Royal Highness can learn these things in the palace. Xiaoan immediately said, we can also learn this outside. But your uncle Huang thinks that we are too tolerant of you. Studying for 5 days and resting for 2 days will make you less enthusiastic about learning, and you will not be able to keep up with others, Mu Yangling reminded the other party. No, Xiaoan immediately said, we have always loved learning, and we will continue to love learning in the future. If we enter the palace, we may be forced to stop loving, right? The little lion and the tiger head nodded again and again, we all love to study now. Fourth aunt, just tell Uncle Huang, let us study outside the palace, we will not be worse than others. Little Xiang also said, Mom, I don't have time to practice martial arts when I go to the palace to study. I want to be a general in the future. How can I be a general if I don't practice martial arts? Chi Heiran frowned, this is a big problem, his son's talent in martial arts is even better than him, and he is born with great strength, it would be a waste for him not to practice martial arts. The prince in the palace will naturally choose a direction to develop when he grows up, but it is all decided after he grows up and determines his hobbies and abilities. He must be at least 12 years old. But Cub's innate abilities and hobbies appeared when he was still a baby, so naturally he didn't have to wait until he grew up to choose a direction. Chi Heiran rubbed his nose, and said to Mu Yangling, I'll talk to Brother Huang about the little bear, but I think it's a bit precarious to let him go out to study in the palace, let alone the 3 little ones. Chi Heiran looked at the 3 younger ones sympathetically, and said, I can only mention it to Brother Huang. Whether or not the matter will be successful depends on their luck. Mu Yangling could see Chi Heiran's thoughts at a glance, and he also supported the children to study in the palace. Mu Yangling frowned, thinking about how to persuade Chi Heiran. She didn't know whether it was better to educate Chi Heiran first with leniency and then strict, or if it was better to be strict first and then leniency, but she always felt that children retain the most of their nature, they at this time, it is more important to guide them to grow up, make them happy, let them be full of doubts about the world, and find answers by themselves. The more experiences, the more memories and directions to think about in the future. Instead of being weighed down by books every day like now, I open my eyes and appear in the school. Before I close my eyes, I am doing my homework. What I think about every day is the questions raised by the teacher and the confusion about the books. What can be proposed by the teacher is the answer given by the predecessors. One generation learns one generation, and knowledge goes back and forth, but no new knowledge emerges. Why? Because the children did not ask new questions. Why can 100 schools of thought contend during the spring and autumn period and the warring states period? Because everyone is constantly asking questions and seeking, and the pace of progress has never stopped. Everyone refutes each other but learns from each other. They squeeze out time to learn, but they need more time to ask questions, then think and solve. Then overthrow and then solve. What now? Everyone holds a book to study, how many people can have their own new questions and new insights? Mu Yangling lay beside Chi Heiran, asked his own questions, and finally said, we can't just focus on one city and one country, we have to focus on the whole world, not only the kingdom of Jin and Xixia, but also seeing the country after the Xixia kingdom, the country after the sea, and even the entire universe. The eyes of children are the cornerstone of the development of this world. Chi Heiran turned over and said, if you look too far, be careful that you can't even do small things in a country or a city. Isn't it like saying that if you don't sweep a house, how can you sweep the world? But if you want to sweep the world, you have to see the world first. How can you think of sweeping the world when you only see an inch of land in front of you? Mu Yangling whispered. Aspiring to sweep the world does not conflict with sweeping a house. They only have to look at it. Only when you have reached the whole world can you get out of the house. Qi Heiran pondered. Mu Yangling sighed and said, Chengzu Neo-Confucianism gradually became popular in the south of the Yangtze River in the former dynasty. I don't deny that it has interpreted some knowledge of the 4 books and 5 classics very well, and it has also done a good job of summarizing. Is it really a blessing for the country to study for convenience and for the imperial examination? I have always felt that reading is to broaden horizons, to have more and better choices on the road of life, and even to pursue the truth in the universe. Not only for conferring on his wife and son, leaving his name in history, but also not for getting promoted and making a fortune. Qi Heiran stared at his wife dumbfounded. He didn't know that Aling still had such thoughts. It felt very strange, as if his wife who had been sleeping on the side of the bed had become a saint. Qi Heiran suddenly felt a little flustered, and he held him tightly in his arms. Mu Yangling didn't notice her husband's uneasiness, she just sighed, we are both ordinary people, and we will work hard to earn money to support our son in this life, no matter how many ideals we have, but I always hope that our children they can go a little farther, and a little further, so that their lives are not as muddled as most people's. Qi Heiran put his chin on the top of Mu Yangling's head, folded his arms tightly, and whispered, it's good to be a layman, I just like to be a layman with you. Mu Yangling poked him with his finger, I know we are laymen, you don't need to emphasize it again and again, I mean the children, you go into the palace and talk to the emperor brother, give the children some freedom, learn we are not in a hurry, at their age they still have a lot to learn besides studying, with such an intensity of study, can they become teachers at the age of 15 or 16 and then enter the court as an official? Qi Heiran said, this age is not too young, the princes of all dynasties all entered the court at this age to practice. Mu Yangling said, but children at this age have not yet settled their minds, so we put them in the court. They jumped from a simple study life to the big dive out of the court. Have you considered the impact on their hearts? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 865. Qi Heiran wants to say, you underestimate the children of the royal family too much, even he was not so innocent when he was a child, he is already an adult at the age of 15 or 16, how can he be considered a child? However, considering Mu Yangling's education and love for Bo Wen and others, Qi Heiran sighed slightly, but he still kept these words in his heart and did not say them out. In fact, the slow growth of children also has the advantages of slow growth. The emperor is in the prime of his life, and he pays attention to maintenance now. In another 30 years, there will be no problems with his health. But at that time, the prince was nearly 40 years old, and the other princes were also growing up. It's done, this struggle for power and profit is probably inevitable. He is not afraid of fighting for power and profit, this is a human instinct, but he is afraid that father and son brothers will fight each other because of the struggle for power and profit, but they all say that there is no father and son brothers in the Tian family. He is not sure whether Xiaobao and the others will be as friendly and helpful as their brothers when they grow up. Support each other. No matter how he grows up and what kind of struggles he has experienced, Qi Heiran will always have a pure land of innocence in his heart. People's hearts, sometimes Qi Ziyuan couldn't bear to hit him even if he knew there was nothing he could do. Qi Heiran didn't sleep all night, and the next day he carried the little bear in his arms and sent him to the palace to study listlessly. After sending the person to the upper study room, Qi Heiran turned around and went to court. Qi Ziyuan glanced at his younger brother again, what happened to this kid today? He kept his head down and didn't speak all morning. The officials in the court were also a little uncomfortable. They didn't hear King Rong's roar today. Everyone looked at the Minister of the Household Department in unison. Did he agree with King Rong's increase in military expenses? Hubyu Shangsha blinked, and could only bow his head in silence. He did not agree to increase the military expenditure, nor did he hear the emperor's order. As for the silence of King Rongjun today, he felt that it was probably because the emperor did not agree to increase the military expenditure. The autumn harvest has just ended, and the tax work has just begun. Although the news from various places is good, there are many places waiting to spend money, especially if the Holy One wants to dredge the Yellow River. Stand up. While distracted by the minister's reports, Qi Ziyuan thought about the reason why his brother was so depressed, and it took him a long time to come up with one. Could it be that the little bear had a quarrel with him last night? Thinking of his younger brother's pampering and little bear's character, Qi Ziyuan believed in his guess more and more, so that Qi Heiran would not quarrel with him, so he went down to Qi Ziyuan and went to the imperial study without calling Qi Heiran. Qi Heiran followed him habitually, but was stopped by Eunuch Wan just after reaching the door. Eunuch Wan looked at King Rong in embarrassment, and said in a low voice, "My lord, the emperor is going to discuss matters with the left and right ministers. Look, why don't I take you to the tea house?" Qi Heiran raised his eyebrows. When did he wait for brother Huang in the tea house? After he pondered for a while, he realized that the elder brother was avoiding him. Qi Heiran said roguely, "It's okay, I'll sit outside and wait for the emperor's brother to be busy." He lifted his robe and was about to sit down. "Oh, don't you, my lord." Eunuch Wan hurriedly supported him, sweating profusely, and said, "Wait a little longer, the servant will go in and report to you." If he dared to let King Rong sit on the threshold today, he would lose his head tomorrow. The man inside is the younger brother, he can bully his younger brother, but others say that King Rong can't say anything bad. Eunuch Wan hurriedly stepped into the imperial study, leaned into the emperor's ear and told Qi Heiran about his rascal behavior. Qi Ziyuan twitched the corners of his mouth, thinking that if he didn't deal with his younger brother today, he would definitely not be able to handle any political affairs. He said, "Let the left and right ministers wait in the tea house first, and let Rong Junwan come in." Eunuch Wan bowed down, invited King Rong in, and stopped the left and right ministers who had just come over, and asked the little eunuch to lead them to the tea house, and he himself guarded the door. In the imperial study room, Qi Ziyuan was nodding Qi Heiran's head and was speechless. "Yesterday I said it well, and I swore that I would never let the little bear go, but it turned out that you were fine, and after only one night, you didn't even touch the little bear. None of them are sent to the palace. Is there anyone who dotes on children so much?" Qi Heiran poked his neck and said, "Zioxiang's talent is in martial arts. If he enters the palace to study with Xiaobao, how can he still have time to practice martial arts? Isn't this a waste of time and talent?" Qi Ziyuan choked for a moment, and said, "Then go to the palace to practice martial arts. I will arrange martial arts masters and teachers for him. In short, we can't let him study with you, so as not to spoil a good child." Qi Heiran's face turned red, and said, "Little Xiang has already said that I am a good father. Brother, you can't make a judgment for the children." Qi Ziyuan snorted, "Whoever's father decides to study for 5 days and take 2 days off, even a child will think his father is a good father. Then why don't you let the palace do the same? I'll send all the children to study in the palace." Qi Ziyuan didn't wait for Qi Heiran to finish speaking. He picked up the booklet on the table and threw it at him. "How dare you think, let the crown prince and the princes also learn for 5 days and rest for 2 days? If you don't learn it yourself, you want everyone not to learn it study." Qi Heiran shouted while jumping to avoid the flying folds, "I am doing this for the good of you and the children." Seeing that he didn't want to repent, Qi Ziyuan felt even more angry, so he simply threw all the papers on the table at him. He always felt that although his younger brother didn't like reading or studying, he was still a good boy and a good father. Not liking to study is not like this at the beginning, but gradually becomes like this when you find out that you are not good at it and are ridiculed by others. Although this boy spoiled his child too much after he became a father, he still stood firm on the issue of right and wrong education, so he has always let him spoil his child, thinking that if the couple can stand their ground, they will not teach the child badly, but now it seems that he was completely wrong. This kid dotes on the child so much that he wants the palace to implement the study system of 5 days and 2 days off for the sake of the child. Isn't it too insane? Chi Heiran was forced to be helpless, so he yelled out what Mu Yangling said to him last night, and finally shouted, "Brother, the children spend all their time on textbooks, so what time do you have to think? Think about other things. And children are the most important time for character growth. What is the benefit of blindly tying them to books at this time? It is better to take them to experience the hardships of the people, so that they will not be able to distinguish between grains and grains when they grow up." Chi Ziyuan lowered his face, and stared at Chi Heiran with heavy eyes. "You came up with this? Can you think of reading as a choice for life and for the pursuit of the truth of the universe?" Chi Heiran rubbed his nose and said, "This is what Aling said, but I think what Aling said is right, Brother Huang. Now you go to the school outside and ask around, how many people study for the imperial examination, officer, how many people study for the sake of understanding? Not to mention the children of poor families, but how many people from aristocratic families study for the purpose of becoming a prince or minister? Although I don't read much, I also know that whether it is the holy words or the war books, most of them come from the spring and autumn period and the warring states period, and most of the later works are interpretations of the words of the saints. There are only a handful of new insights, and most of them are derived from the words of the sages. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 866. Chi Ziyuan pondered for a long time before saying, "I can't let my children of the Chi family take this risk, Heiran. If everyone matures early, but Xiaobao, Xiaoxiang and others learn later than others, it may be a disaster for the royal family. If the king matures later than the minister, in the end it may be that the minister is superior to the king, and the country will be destroyed by then." "I've thought about this too," Chi Heiran hurriedly said, "but Brother Huang, we are in good health. Unless there is an accident, won't we not live long enough for them to grow up? And it is impossible for us to give up for unknown accidents, and more it is good for their growth, and as long as they have time to grow up, so what if they mature later than children of the same age? There are very few emperors in the royal families who can live past 60, Chi Ziyuan said sadly. That's because they either live extravagantly and spend too much of their lives, or they work too hard for the country, and their bodies are overdrawn. Brother Huang, take our brothers as an example. Even if we married late and didn't have our first child until 20 years later, the children have grown up and can slowly get in touch with government affairs. After 10 years of experience, we will grow older, and they can also slowly take over state affairs. After another 5 years at most, we can let go. People in the royal family have the best resources in the world, but why don't they live long? In addition to you poisoning me to assassinate and other conspiracies and frame UPS, it is their living habits and attitudes. When the prince reaches the age of 13, he will arrange for a maid to teach the other party about sex. The original intention is to spread the branches and leaves for the royal family and guide the prince to understand this knowledge, so as to prevent the other party from messing around and causing bad things outside. But in fact, the children born at this time either died young or were in poor health. At the age of 13, I am a child myself, my body has not matured, and I have very little essence. At this time, regular sex life is undoubtedly overdrawing my life, and most people in the royal family will not restrain themselves in this regard. Adding living habits such as drinking and having fun on the internet have made most members of the royal family not long-lived. At least few of them survived their 60th year, and most of them died when they were over 40. Obviously sitting on the best medical resources in the world, but his lifespan is so short. Mu Yangling doesn't believe that the imperial physician in the palace would not know the key to it, but the imperial physician didn't mention it, and the royal family didn't ask. Obviously everyone knows it well, at least because of habit to maintain this rule. At this time, Qi Heiran pierced the window paper and told Qi Xiaoyuan that they could re-establish the rules of the palace, and the princes could only send maids to enlighten them when they were 18 years old, and only then could they get married. Qi Heiran suggested that the imperial physician should tell the princes about sex in this area. As long as he knows that sex life at a young age will make him frigid and shorten his life when he grows up, he does not believe that there are still royal children who will not be able to hold back mistakes. If there are people who are not afraid of death and bump into it, then they don't have to worry about it. Why should they stop people who are not afraid of death? And this is also an important means to test the prince's self-control. If he can't even control his own desires, such a person is naturally not worthy of being a king. As long as the life expectancy is guaranteed, then they can provide time for future generations to study. Qi Heiran and Mu Yangling have calculated that if they take 5 days and 2 rests, the children will graduate 4 years later, because it is different from the current education method that is strict first and then lenient. 5 days and 2 rests only exist before they are 14 years old. After they turn 14, the intensity of study will increase, and then it will become 10 days 1 rest. At that time, they will just turn 20. In the past 15 years, what they learned was not only the knowledge in books, but also many other skills, which were enough for them to cope with the experience after entering the court. And the most important point, Qi Heiran said in a low voice, "Brother, why did the Emperor Wu of the Han Wogu rebellion happen? Because his crown prince was too early and too long." Qi Xiaoyuan's complexion changed, and he sat on the chair without speaking for a long time, until Qi Heiran felt that his legs were a little sore, and he said, "I want to see Aling, let her come to the palace tomorrow." Qi Xiaoyuan didn't see Mu Yangling, but asked someone to take her to the upper study room. He asked Eunuch Wan to say to Mu Yangling, "If you want to stay in the palace for 5 days and 2 days, go and convince the gentlemen, as long as I can persuade them, I will have no problem here." Both Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang looked at Mu Yangling eagerly. Mu Yangling thought about it and said to Wang Gong, "Go and tell the emperor, just say that I know, but he has to give me some time." Eunuch Wan said flatteringly, "The emperor said, the princess can take as long as she wants, as long as you can convince the gentleman, the emperor can give the order immediately." Mu Yangling nodded in satisfaction, and took the 2 children to see Prince Shaofu. Since Taifalu was dismissed from office, Fang Shaofu has been the biggest official among the teachers in Donggong, and Xiaobao's homework is indeed the lecturer. The emperor said she persuaded all the gentlemen, but in fact Mu Yangling felt that she only had to persuade. It's almost the same with Fang Shaofu. Fang Ziwen has a straightforward personality, profound knowledge, and is highly respected among scholars. He never thought that one day he would directly confront a woman, and the 2 would have a face-to-face conversation with a pot of tea on the desk. Road. The Crown Prince and Rong Junwang Shiza bowed their hands and stood on the side. Fang Ziwen couldn't sit still, he got up and said, "My lord, why don't you let the prince and the prince sit down, it's better for me to stand." Mu Yanglingen sat on the table, waved his hand and said, "Sir, just sit." At this moment, the 2 of them are just students, and you are the teacher. It's only natural for them to stand. Xiaobao hurriedly cupped his hands and saluted, "Fourth aunt is right, please sit down quickly, sir." Seeing that Mu Yanglingen couldn't sit still, Fang Ziwen had no choice but to sit cross-legged. Mu Yangling poured him a cup of tea, and then pulled out a copy of annotation to the 4 books that she had just asked Xiaobao to take out of the study, handed it to Fang Ziwen and asked, "What do you think of this book, Mr. Fang? What the sage says is naturally good." "Sir, do you think Zhu 11 can be compared with the sage?" Fang Ziwen raised his eyebrows. Most people in the world respect Zhu 11 as Zhu Zi, but few people call him by his name directly, let alone Mu Yangling is just a woman. However, Fang Ziwen was not angry at all, and said after some consideration, the four books commentary is easy to understand, and for the poor, this book can be regarded as holy words. To put it bluntly, this book is Zhu 11's notes and lesson plans for reading the four books. Why do poor children have difficulty reading? In addition to the high cost of reading, because there are no good teachers and friends, the book is not easy to read, but also to understand its meaning. However, Chinese characters are extensive and profound, and a word can have multiple interpretations. A lifetime of books may not be able to understand the meaning of them, but Zhu 11 is willing to annotate the four books into a book to benefit scholars all over the world, so he will naturally be respected and loved by others. And some poor students don't need to buy the four books anymore, they only need to buy an annotation to the four books to read all the four books, and the style of writing in the south of the Yangtze River is prevalent, and Zhu 11 can be regarded as a saint among the poor students in the south of the Yangtze River. Fang Ziwen's family background is not obvious, he has also read annotation to the four books and even praised this book very much at one time, but with the growth of experience, he inevitably has a different interpretation of the words and annotations in the book, so now he is more concerned about this book. The attitude is mediocre, and I would never recommend students to watch it. Seeing his attitude, Mu Yangling threw the book aside and said, "This book is a good book for poor students in a short period of time, but in the long run, it is not good for the country or the people." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 867. Fang Ziwen raised his eyebrows. The princess is here today to discuss the annotation to the four books with the official? That is unnecessary, because the official does not intend to recommend His Highness and the Crown Prince to read this book. No, Mu Yangling looked up at Fang Ziwen, and said with a smile, "I came here to tell Fang Shaofu that what the world thinks is good may not necessarily be good, and what the world is used to may not necessarily be good. If you want to buy a copy of annotations to the four books, schools in other places gradually have this requirement, but annotations to the four books is just a family opinion. Those who read annotations to the four books are actually reading Zhu 11's annotations to the four books, but scholars regard them as the words of sages. Decades or 100 years have passed, and scholars in this world have only this one explanation for the four books. Fang Shaofu, do you think this is good or bad?" Fang Ziwen's complexion changed. This is a major matter for the country. Why did Princess Rongjun come to tell him about it? Fang Ziwen's thoughts turned, and he looked at Mu Yangling deeply. Mu Yangling was thinking about how to introduce the vacation system in her heart, and Fang Ziwen was not showing any emotion, so she didn't know the horror in Fang Ziwen's heart, so she just continued, "You are familiar with poetry and books, and you are the prince's young master, you should know that there are different opinions on reading, and you should not insist on unity. After all, people are different, and their thoughts and experiences are different, so their opinions are naturally different, so Confucius suggested early on that teaching should be taught in accordance with their aptitude." Fang Ziwen nodded cautiously, "What the princess said is not bad." Seeing that he agreed with his opinion, Mu Yangling breathed a sigh of relief, and said with a smile, "What kind of teaching method does Fang Shaofu think is suitable for His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and the royal children?" Fang Ziwen was stunned for a moment, glanced at the Crown Prince and the Prince who were standing with their hands down, and said with a smile, "Princess, don't worry, for the Prince and the Prince, our gentlemen in the study have a set of teaching methods, which will not let them read boringly, let alone I will copy the annotation to the four books and analyze it with them. There is a strong team of teachers in the study room. There are only 2 students now. It can be said that the teaching task is very easy. If Princess Rongjun just wants them to take care of the eldest son, teaching according to his personality and hobbies is not a big problem. Fang Shaofu, children's growth is not just about having books. Now that you study according to your schedule, how much time do children have to do their own things? Fang Ziwen frowned. The crown prince and the eldest son are both children, what can they do? What Mu Yangling was waiting for was Fang Ziwen's words. He turned his head and said to the prince, Xiaobao, come and tell your teacher what you have to do every 10 days, and tell your teacher in detail. Xiaobao has a lot of things to do, because his time is very tight, and these things have formed a habit in the past 2 years, so telling him to say it is as simple as memorizing, from what time he gets up in the morning to study to thinking about it during his study. He explained clearly what he had done and what he had done, and when he was on vacation, he would go out of the palace to visit the school he ran, deal with some matters, and then go shopping and buy some souvenirs for his father, mother, and queen, as well as his brothers and sisters. Gift. Fang Ziwen didn't know that the prince was still supporting the children to go to school in Zhuangzi, so he couldn't help but widen his eyes when he heard about it. Hearing that the prince would take the second prince to play with the eldest princess after school, his heart trembled even more. Trembling. Royal brothers rarely have a harmonious relationship unless they are siblings, but the crown prince can take the second prince to play with him privately without any surprises. Fang Ziwen instantly understood what the empress meant. Xiaobao secretly glanced at his fourth aunt, and seeing her nodding at him encouragingly, he whispered to Fang Ziwen, but sir, I rarely spend time with my younger siblings, and I often only play with them for a while before going. I do my homework or go to bed, and I don't have much time off during the week, and there are still many things I want to do but can't. Fang Ziwen turned his head to look at Mu Yangling. Now he was a little uncertain about the purpose of Mu Yangling's visit this time. Could it be to intercede for the prince and let them leave school earlier? But wouldn't it be more appropriate for the emperor or queen to say this? Although they are the prince's husbands, they are also courtiers, and they will not disobey the emperor's orders. Before Fang Ziwen could come up with a reason, Mu Yangling said again. Fang Xiaofu finished listening to the prince, and then listened to Xiao Xiang. Xiao Xiang, you first talk about what you did every day when you were studying with Mr. Yuan. Let's talk about what you do every day after entering the palace to study. Little Bear is not as organized as Little Treasure, and what's more, he doesn't have a plan for what he does every day, so his words are a little confusing, but Fang Ziwen is the Prince Xiaofu, and his ability to summarize is not very good, so he quickly summed up Little Bear's wonderful life. This kid's study life in the palace is very exciting. After getting up every day, he first practice martial arts with his father, then take a bath and have breakfast before going to school. Mr. Yuan is very tolerant to him and teaches him according to his aptitude, so that he still can only read 3-character classic. Well, a teacher who discriminates against students' IQ is not a good teacher, so Fang Ziwen continued to listen with a straight attitude. Xiao Xiang also leaves school early in the afternoon. The most important thing is that he has a course called Jiu. He really doesn't understand why the palace arranges such an advanced course Jiu for a 6-year-old child. Either take the younger brothers to the house to uncover the tiles, go into the water to fish, climb trees and dig the soil, or toss the wooden machinery by yourself. Jiu, to put it bluntly, is a modern physics class. Mu Yangling didn't want to give him this course, but Xiao Xiang expressed a strong interest in it after visiting Xia Hei's carpentry course. He wanted to make a bow and crossbow by himself. Qi Heiran has always doted on his son, so with a wave of his hand, he invited a crossbow master in the army to teach him, but after he learned it, he became very interested in the mechanical principles. This is not something a crossbow master can teach him. After Mu Yangling asked Mr. Yuan, and learned that he also knew the basic knowledge of Jiu, he assuredly taught his son to him. To learn Jiu, he must first learn arithmetic well. Of course, Mr. Yuan, who knows the nature of the world, cannot just blindly teaching him arithmetic, but explaining some basic physics principles to him every now and then assigning him hands-on homework, such as making kites, Kongming lanterns, boats, and wooden horses. So Shizi is very busy. This is Fang Ziwen's final conclusion. Unlike the imperial palace, the prince learns to rest for 5 days and rests for 2 days, and he has to rest on festivals like the spring solstice and summer solstice. One more thing to add is that the prince also has a holiday when the farming season is busy, and it was a long vacation, because he was going to go to the village to sow seeds and transplant rice seedlings himself. Fang Ziwen expressed doubts about this, and the son of the royal family planted rice seedlings. Wouldn't it be just standing on the edge of the field ridge to watch? Fang Ziwen is very good at hiding his emotions, so he didn't show it. Naturally, the other 3 people present didn't know that Fang Ziwen suspected Xiaoxiang of cheating, but he was upright and didn't want to see the princess being deceived, so he asked an extra question, the son of a family after farming. How do you feel? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 868. Little Xiang said in a depressed mood, I don't understand why the peasants can't eat enough to eat even after working so hard, and they don't have the money to see a doctor or take medicine when they are sick. Dad said it's because farming depends entirely on the weather. When the weather is good, the harvest is good, and when the weather is bad, lack of harvest, good times and bad days, no matter how much you accumulate, you will lose everything in a bad year, not to mention that few people have large savings. And my mother said that it's because of the low grain output and the high land rent and tax, which makes it difficult for the people to accumulate money and food, and there are few sideline jobs. People are busy when the farming is busy, but they are all idle when the farming is slack, Little Bear said. I don't quite understand what I'm talking about. I think it's because there are no cattle. Xiahei's family has no cattle, so his family is very poor. Dakei's family has 2 cows, so his family's life is much easier. My mother manages a big cattle farm. I feel that as long as all the cattle are given to people who don't have cattle, they will all have enough to eat. Fang Ziwen was stunned, then looked at Mu Yangling, stood up solemnly, and saluted. The son's heart is kind, it's a lowly official who treats others with the heart of a villain, he is really ashamed. Why did you say that, sir? Please sit down quickly, and I would like to ask you to forgive me. This child has not read many books with us since he was a child, so he doesn't understand some advanced words. I'm afraid he will offend you less trouble. Fang Ziwen was about to be humble, when Xiaobao said with a serious face, Brother, you are wrong, if you have cows, you may not be able to eat enough. Zuza's family has cows, but his family can't have enough to eat, and they can't even pay for sickness and medical treatment, so it doesn't make much difference whether they have cattle or not. No, there is obviously a big difference. The 2 children quarreled. Fang Ziwen's eyes widened as it was the first time he had such an experience. After all, Xiaoxiang has only entered the palace to study for less than half a month, and he is exhausted every day, and he doesn't even have much time to talk. Naturally, he has no time to argue with Xiaobao, so this is the first time Fang Ziwen has seen such a scene. Just when his eyes widened, Mu Yangling waved his hand to interrupt the dispute between the 2 of them, and said, Okay, if you argue like this until tomorrow, you won't be able to tell who is wrong. Hurry up and find some time tomorrow to do an investigation. You can see the difference when you look at the situation of people with cattle and those without cattle. Out of the corner of Mu Yangling's eyes, he saw the slight surprise in Fang Ziwen's eyes, and said, After you finish the investigation, make a copy for your husband, and let him give you some pointers. Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang hurriedly responded. It was not the first time they had done this kind of thing. At this moment they were already preparing a draft in their hearts, and planned to go out of the palace to do investigations when they were taking a rest. Look, Fang Xiaofu, the children are very busy, and they didn't waste a little time. Whether it's loving brothers, being filial to their parents, or solving doubts in their hearts, these all take time, so I don't want the prince and the son to spend all their time spent on textbooks. Fang Ziwen couldn't help sitting up straight, knowing that the main event was coming. The other party had laid the groundwork so much, wasn't it just a request to him? He said, then according to Wang Fei's opinion, I think that the children of the royal family have more educational resources than the children of the poor family, so they should naturally have more choices. It is not difficult for them to teach students in accordance with their aptitude, so Fang Xiaofu, why not slow down the teaching, let children have more free time to do what they want to do and seek their answers. Just like what Little Bear asked just now, why are farmers working so hard but are not rich, and even basic food and clothing are difficult to maintain? This is a question, gentlemen, can you give him an answer? Can your answer satisfy them? Instead of giving them perfunctory or fixed answers, it's better to let them find the answers themselves. Does the princess want the imperial palace to study for 5 days and take 2 days off like the palace? Fang Ziwen is not stupid. Mu Yangling has said so much, but the focus is on the word time. Mu Yangling nodded, and said calmly, yes, Fang Xiaofu, they are not in a hurry to grow up, and entering the imperial court after the age of 20 is much earlier than others, isn't it? How many people in this world can pass the Jinshi examination and become an official in the court before the age of 20? Fang Ziwen said, the prince will naturally listen to the emperor at what age he enters the court. But it is impossible for the prince to enter the court if he has not completed his studies. As long as Fang Xiaofu agrees to the new study schedule here, the emperor will naturally adjust the time for the prince to enter the court. I came to find Fang Xiaofu. Apparently the emperor thinks that Fang Xiaofu can make up his mind on this matter. Fang Ziwen's mind changed. If the emperor wanted to disagree, he could simply reject Rongjun King and Rongjun Princess, and if he disagreed in his heart, he could also simply refuse. There is no need to push people to him. At this time, Princess Rongjun came, which meant that the emperor was also uncertain. It was Princess Rongjun who came instead of King Rongjun, showing weakness and asking for something. If it was King Rong, with King Rong's character, he might ask him to adjust the time as soon as he opened his mouth. The princess of the county, the other party is a woman, just based on this, he will not care too much about the other party, even if he says the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. So although the emperor was uncertain, he actually favored Princess Rongjun. Fang Ziwen sighed quietly, and began to think seriously. If the crown prince can maintain such an attitude of inquiry and learning as before, there is nothing wrong with easing the teaching time. As Princess Rongjun said, they are the children of the royal family and do not need the imperial examination to become officials, so there are many choices. And the growth of a person is never just reading. Everything in life can make children grow and learn. If you are long, you will learn what is good, and if you are short, you will learn what is lacking. But this learning method is not suitable for every royal child, because not all princes are guided by someone like Princess Rongjun. At least he won't. He may tell his children that the land rent and tax are too high, he may lament the barren land, the wind and rain, and the sufferings of the people, but he will not think of letting the children find the answer by themselves. But it is undeniable that such an arrangement will allow the children of the royal family to have a broader path, at least it will allow them to cultivate their hobbies more, so that they will not flock to the vortex of power when they grow up. But the most important thing is that this is a teaching method that is beneficial but not harmful to the prince. Fang Ziwen is the crown prince's young master. Naturally, everything should start from the prince's interests. Being able to let the prince get in touch with people's livelihood at a young age will have a great influence and effect on his participation in politics in the future. With such learning experience, as long as the prince's heart is not too, it will not grow crooked. Then he will be a generation of Mingjun from now on. To be able to teach a generation of Mingjun, How much temptation is this to Fang Ziwen? What civil servants pursue is nothing more than leaving a name in history, but as an emperor's teacher, his greatest wish is to teach a generation of wise emperors. Fang Ziwen had better take Mu Yangling's suggestion, he said. As for the other doctors, let the lower officials persuade them. Mu Yangling saluted Fang Ziwen gratefully, and then asked Xiao Bao and Xiao Xiong to salute their husband, and then took the two children to leave. Fang Ziwen asked when Mu Yangling turned around, "The princess seems to dislike Zhu 11 very much." Mu Yangling said with a smile, "I can't talk about likes and dislikes. If his annotation to the 4 books hadn't had such a great influence, I might praise him for being sensitive, knowledgeable, and talented, but this book is now being morbidly criticized. I can't say I have a good opinion of him, it's not for him personally, but for the entire Chengzu Neo-Confucianism. After all, he just wrote a book. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 869. Fang Ziwen lowered his eyes, but he just wrote a book, so the situation is not necessarily what the other party expected, and Chengzu Neo-Confucianism is pushed to such a high level, it is just a purposeful deduction. It's ridiculous that many things that scholars and officials can't see through have been pointed out by a woman. Fang Ziwen thought of the current situation of Shilin in the south of the Yangtze River, and his heart was tormented like a fire. Just as Princess Rong said, if Chengzu Neo-Confucianism is allowed to prevail, I am afraid that in a few decades, there will be no new scholars in Shilin. If it is advanced, everyone will only copy Zhu 11's understanding. He wanted to break this rule, but he was afraid of causing dissatisfaction with the royal family. Zhu 11's fourth uncle's commentary was clearly in the royal family's arms, because all his commentaries implied loyalty and filial piety. Loyalty and filial piety are not wrong, but such emphasis loses the original meaning of the sage's words. Fang Ziwen looked at Princess Rongjun, who had gone far away, and sighed quietly. The princess understands the truth, but I don't know if the emperor understands it. Qi Ziyuan naturally didn't understand, because he didn't have time to pay attention to this, he was really too busy, but no matter how busy he was, when he received Fang Ziwen's note, he still called someone to have a sincere talk, and then he gave a reply, and then Hanlin. The bachelors of the academy all know that the teaching time in the palace has been greatly adjusted, leaving most of the free time for the princes. Before the gentlemen in the study had time to object, Fang Ziwen invited them to his home for a discussion. He asked someone to tidy up the big room next to his study and put them on a mat. Everyone imitated the celebrities in the Jin dynasty to express their opinions. Of course, Fang Ziwen did not copy Mu Yangling's words. Ordinary people listened to her words, but the Hanlin scholars who had read poetry and books and had a proud personality were somewhat disdainful, so Fang Ziwen summed it up and polished it. Everyone. The Hanlin bachelors who can be selected by Qi Ziyuan as Mr. Shang Shufang are naturally not too young, and the youngest one is also 38, so everyone is not impulsive, and they will naturally think about what Fang Ziwen said. Everyone debated in the room for a day and a night, but in the end they still lost to the Ziwen faction, and had to accept a new teaching time. It is better to say that they are competing for teaching time than teaching methods. The royal family can influence the aristocratic families and the powerful, and the aristocratic families and the powerful can affect the people. But the aristocratic family and the powerful have the resources and ability. What about the poor family? It is difficult for them to even buy a book, let alone adopt such a free teaching method, which is undoubtedly a blow to them. Moreover, during this debate, many Hanlin scholars expressed their dissatisfaction with Zhu 11's commentary on the annotations to the 4 books. Far-reaching impact. The insightful people among them are unavoidable. The poor family has been fighting with the aristocratic family for a long time. In the previous Emperor Sejong, the poor family had the upper hand, and the aristocratic family has always been in the upper position. Because today they are dissatisfied with the aristocratic family's enclosure and hidden households, so they vigorously support the poor family. If the debate spreads this time, I am afraid that next year's imperial examination questions will deviate from Zoo 11's annotations to the 4 books, which will be a catastrophe for poor families. Fang Ziwen also sighed quietly, and deliberately passed these words to Mu Yangling's ears. Mu Yangling said in amazement, how could there be such a big influence? Qi Heiran took it for granted, most of the officials who wrote the questions came from the disciples of those few Hanlin scholars, or they wrote the questions themselves. Isn't it natural for them to favor their own likes and dislikes? Mu Yangling sat up straight and said, I have always believed that education reform should adopt a method of moistening things silently, not fast, but stable. Because of instability, we may destroy the life of a generation. Although I don't like that Zoo 11 unified the answers to the 4 books, but it doesn't mean that I agree to ban its status and role. Unless the state comes up with a way to resettle these students who have used the annotation to the 4 books as a textbook since childhood, otherwise I don't agree to tamper with the exam. Scope. Heiran, you have to make Brother Huang make a decree, otherwise the hearts of scholars in the world will be uneasy and chaos will arise. Qi Heiran stared, how dare a group of scholars make trouble? It's related to their future in life. As long as they are not too good at home, everyone will fight for it. Brother Huang issued an imperial decree. We just use this to break the monopoly of annotation to the 4 books and express the attitude of the royal family and all the Hanlin scholars. Mu Yangling pushed Qi Heiran, go to the palace quickly. It wasn't until Qi Heiran entered the palace that Qi Ziyuan realized that this matter was going to happen. He just wanted to give his sons more free time, so why did he offend scholars all over the world? Qi Ziyuan asked, they speak as they speak, and argue as they argue. Why do they involve Zoo 11? How could Qi Heiran, a warrior, understand? He just said, brother, don't worry about why they got involved. Anyway, it's been involved now, and this matter has to be resolved. If Aling's words are spread, those scholars will definitely make a fuss, so you should quickly issue an order to reassure them. Qi Ziyuan had never read Zoo 11's annotation to the 4 books. The 4 books he was enlightened by when he was a child was directly lectured by his husband. At that time, this book had not had such a great influence among scholars. When he grew up, although he occasionally read the 4 books, but he already has his own fixed understanding, and he is a general, so naturally he will not read that book again. He couldn't quite understand why a book with annotations was so highly regarded. Qi Heiran told Qi Ziyuan that most of the students who read this book were poor students, because some could not afford to go to school or hire teachers, and many annotated books were not only scattered but also incomplete. Zoo 11 annotated the 4 books, although it was his family's opinion, but for the poor students in the world, it can be regarded as a great merit. Even now, Mu Yangling has not denied his contribution, but his descendants and those of Chengzu Neo-Confucianism have other intentions to praise this book blindly, excluding the annotations and analysis of other scholars, making many scholars only recognize this annotation. Even if Mu Yangling is not a scholar, he will inevitably be overwhelmed by their domineering. What's more, she clearly knows that the consequence of only recognizing one book is rigid thinking. Mu Yangling wants her sons to go to the universe. She doesn't restrict the children's whimsy. After growing up, these ideas will definitely collide with other people's fixed ideas, and I'm afraid that children will be classified as heterogeneous. Mu Yangling knew the importance of allies, so before Qi Heiran entered the palace, Mu Yangling threw all these worries to him, and asked him to find a way to draw Qi Ziyuan to their side. As long as the emperor stood by them here, what are they afraid of? As for the ideas of loyalty and filial piety advocated in Zoo 11's book, if you look around, which book would promote rebellious speech? And if this book is really useful, why do you 2 brothers rebel? Well, you 2 haven't read the book. Then why the former courtiers who have read this book in the court still work for the emperor's brother? Why didn't I see them jumping out and committing suicide in order to reconcile with Emperor Jingyan's relationship with the monarch and ministers? In the final analysis, it's just because people are profit-seeking animals, so don't believe in how useful a book is. What you have to believe in is profit. The popularity of Zoo 11's books is based on interests, and it allows poor students to obtain fame at a lower cost. Everyone obeys the idea of loyalty to the emperor in the book because of interests, and it is also because of interests that they violate nature. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Zhu. Chapter 870. Naturally, scholars know better about scholars, so Qi Ziyuan summoned the academicians from the Imperial Academy into the palace to discuss how to write the imperial decree. The imperial decree was written but not sent out immediately. Qi Ziyuan needed an opportunity, but before he could make it work, people from Chengzhu's school of Neo-Confucianism broke out in righteous indignation. Among them, the Zhu family was the most angry. Zhu Zikai passed away a few years ago. Although he was also an official in the court, his official position was not great, but his influence on the Zhu family was not small. Because he annotated the 4 books, he was revered as a sage in the south of the Yangtze River, especially the poor students, and he was honored as Zhu Zi when he was mentioned, and his family also benefited a lot naturally. They did not want Zhu 11's status to be challenged, so several Hanlin they were the most angry when the Maestas debate came out. Because in the debate, many people belittled the book annotation to the 4 books. How can this make them not angry? But the biggest official of the Zhu family was only 5th grade, and he didn't even have the qualifications to go to the court, so he couldn't raise objections in the court, so they encouraged the students to help them seek justice. Those students who have always used the annotation to the 4 books as a reference book were also afraid of the tricky questions from the court, so they responded one after another. The capital is in the south of the Yangtze River, so the emperor immediately knew what was going on outside. The imperial decree he had prepared came in handy at this time. In order to convey the holy intention more clearly, Qi Ziyuan asked people to repeat it at the gates of various county yamen recite. Qi Ziyuan affirmed Zhu 11's contribution to education in the imperial decree. The other parties' commentaries on the 4 books did provide convenience to many students. But these are all family opinions. Some of the knowledge in textbooks have fixed answers, but some have thousands of interpretations for thousands of people, and there is no conflict. What Zhu 11 gave is only one of thousands of explanations. He hopes that readers we must also forge ahead and think positively instead of fooling others and ourselves with ready-made answers. As for the exam questions that everyone is worried about, it is not a problem at all, because except for policy theory, most of the questions will still come from the 4 books and 5 classics. Even if everyone uses the textbooks, the annotations are the same. In view of the different thinking and literary talents of each person, the answer naturally, they are also different. They will not come up with weird questions for the sake of seeking differences. This is an imperial examination, an examination for the country's talents, and it is not a child's play. But the emperor also said that if 99 of the 100 test papers have the same answer, but there is another one that is different, as long as it is not a wrong answer, the examiner will naturally give him high marks first, so he encourages students to use their own understanding, instead of copying annotations. This imperial decree spread all over the world and aroused discussions among many students, especially the students in Jiangnan who were greatly impacted. The Zhu family and the Chengzhou Neo-Confucianists couldn't explain their hardships, because the emperor didn't say that Zhu 11 was wrong. He praised Zhu 11, but he felt that everyone should not only recognize the annotations of one book. At this time, other schools surged up, restraining the resistance of Chengzhou Neo-Confucianism, and making factional disputes disappear invisible. In the final analysis, it was because Chengzhou Neo-Confucianism had just raised its head, and before it had time to gain a foothold, it was uprooted by Mu Yangling's unintentional example. Nowadays, those who use Zhu 11's book as a textbook are only students under the age of 25. It has not grown into a faction of officials, so its power is limited. Moreover, his books are only highly respected in Jiangnan, and have just risen in other regions, and have not had time to become popular, so this turmoil can come and go quickly. But Qi Ziyuan paid attention to the scholars. Although they had no soldiers to rebel, the chaos they caused could still cause a lot of losses to the country, and because the scholars controlled the speech, it was easier to stir up panic among the people. Qi Ziyuan has never been an emperor, but he also knows that one family is not allowed to become big in any field, otherwise the imperial power will be easily restricted or sidelined. The same goes for reading. The imperial examination was dominated by Confucianism, but Taoism also had a place. The 4 books annotated by Zhu 11 obviously respected Confucianism more. How could he let Zhu 11 alone take the lead? So Qi Ziyuan called all the imperial scholars into the palace, implying that they can also write books and say that Zhu 11 can write annotations, can't you? Those who can be admitted to the Imperial Academy are all those who have passed 5 tests and cut 6 generals and squeezed over the single plank bridge of the Imperial examination. No one has ever been convinced by anyone, and their eyes lit up when they heard the words, but several people were also distressed. Limited, I'm afraid. Publishing a book also requires money. If they want to make money, they have to pay for the book after the book is sold. Qi Ziyuan frowned slightly, and said, I will discuss this matter with the Minister of the Household Department, and see if I can allocate a sum of money to you. The Imperial Academy thanked Dade and withdrew. When Mu Yangling heard about it, he hurried into the palace and said to Qi Ziyuan, Brother, leave the matter of publishing the book to me, and the user department will allocate additional money. With Qi Ziyuan's current stinginess, he might not be able to allocate much money. The matter has been done 99 steps, and there must be no mistakes at the last step. The most important thing is that everyone in Chengzhu's Neo-Confucianism now knows that it is her. I hate her for provoking it. She can't let there be only one commentary on the market no matter what. Anyway, she has her own bookstore, and it is the most advanced movable type printing. In addition to ink and paper, workers and machines are ready-made, and the cost is not big at all. As long as the books can be sold, she can make a lot of money here. What's more, he could still win the favor of several Hanlin scholars, so why not do it? Qi Ziyuan felt that Mu Yangling was sharing his worries, so he agreed happily, and said, if you don't have enough money, just tell me, and I will ask the inner government to allocate it to you. Mu Yangling nodded repeatedly, but he didn't really ask him for money. Qi Heiran also said, brother is mostly just talking about it. He is tight-fisted now, and every penny is tight. You must not ask him for money, or he will have to torment me when he has a heartache later. Don't worry, I can't take the money even if the elder brother forced me. Qi Heiran asked curiously, when did you become so self-conscious? What do you know? Books are written by Imperial Academy. They may be the ones who will publish the Imperial examination questions in the next 10 years. If they write books, how many people will buy them? Mu Yangling snorted, that's why it is said that everything is based on interests, you just read it, as soon as their annotations come out, Zhu 11's book will have to stand back. This book is too expensive, even poor students can't afford it. Mu Yangling smiled and said, don't worry, the cost here is only 1/3 of that of other bookstores. The price won't be too high, but it can't be too cheap, or other bookstores will be angry. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 871. Mu Yangling asked the steward of the bookstore to find the stewards of the Hanlin family, and the two parties signed a contract. Mu Yangling said that as long as it was written by a few adults, she would help publish the book here, and they didn't need to pay a penny in advance. It also implies that their bookstore can not only publish their annotations, but also their poems, essays, travel notes, and various reading experiences, and even the scripts they write in their spare time. They all publish poems, essays, and travel notes. Yu Hanlin looked at his housekeeper suspiciously and asked, "The cost is not low, and how long will it take?" "Rongjun Palace is willing to invest so much." The housekeeper lowered his head and said, "But that was what the manager of the bookstore said personally. The slave thinks that the majestic palace can't deceive people. This matter is only good for the master and not bad, so I signed it." "You see. Sign it." Hanlon stroked his beard and said with a smile, "The notes need to be sorted out slowly, but the essays and essays are not needed. I have quite a few in my study, sir. I will make a whole stack later and you can send them to see if they are good. If it is printed, it will show that what they said is true." The other Imperial Academy obviously thought the same way, so the manager of the bookstore sent Mu Yangling a lot of manuscripts the next day. Mu Yangling flipped through it, nodded and said, "As expected of being from the Imperial Academy, the quality and quantity of the manuscripts that are taken out casually are of high quality. Since they are willing to try it, you should hurry up and ask someone to print it, and each copy will be printed in 500 copies, and one copy will be sent to each Hanlin, and the rest will be distributed to various branches, and the price will be lower. The bookstore has accumulated a lot of movable type over the years. It can be said that except for a few particularly rare characters, each type has accumulated 20 to 30 characters, and the commonly used characters have reached 50 or 60. They are classified according to the ratio of radicals and placed on the shelf. It is very convenient and fast to take. To print a book now is not like before. The whole book needs to be carved and printed, and a single word difference will be ruined. The bookstore has sufficient manpower, and other branches in the south of the Yangtze River also received the manuscripts for printing. With mutual cooperation, all the manuscripts were printed into volumes in less than 3 days. Mu Yangling asked people to send the books to the Hanlin. Everyone thought that the Wangfu bookstore published his own book first, so they were naturally complacent, but it was only the next day that they found out that everyone received the book together, and when they got home, they heard the manager talk about the bookstore. "Having already entered their book, I couldn't help being shocked. How many people have been invested in the palace, how could it be so fast?" The housekeeper said, "I heard that they use a different printing method." "What is it called?" "Movable type printing. It was popular in the Northland a few years ago, but all bookstores are unwilling to change the printing method. Therefore, except for the Princess's bookstore, only some small bookstores in the north use this method." "No way, woodblock printing has already matured by this time. Which bookstore does not have a rich collection of editions? They can compete with everyone without re-engraving, and there is more than enough time to engrave a new edition if the edition is broken. However, in this way, there are few new books on the market, and most of the old content is constantly printed. A small number of new books are also very expensive." The Hanlin people got brand new books and sighed, "Princess Rongjun has a keen mind, no wonder she can be favored by King Rongjun alone." At this time, Fang Ziwen was also lamenting that Princess Rongjun has such insight and such means, no wonder she can only favor the backyard of the palace, and is also respected by the emperor. Today the Crown Prince and the Crown Prince sorted out their surveys and handed them over to him. Above is a comparison chart showing the income and farming conditions of households with cattle and households without cattle. The income and cultivation conditions of households without cattle are clear at a glance. Speculate. Fang Ziwen never knew that questions could be answered in this way, so he inevitably wrote the question that Xiaoxiang had asked on the rice paper, and the younger son looked at it when he came to hand in his homework. The kid didn't dare to ask him, so he went to ask his mother, "Why do farmers have to work hard for a year and still have enough food and clothing?" Of course, Mrs. Fang would not let the child find the answer by himself, but told him about the class division of scholars, farmers, businessmen, and told him that as long as he studies hard, farmers can become farming and studying people, or they can get rid of their status as farmers if they get fame or filial piety. Further, let the family get rid of poverty and become rich. Fang Ziwen thought about the low-key princess who hardly appeared in the official family's communication, and thought about who was the real wise and foolish one. Looking at the madam with an ugly face, Fang Ziwen sighed, "Okay, I don't blame you, but you shouldn't tell your child these things." "What's wrong with me saying this?" Mrs. Fang said angrily, "could it be wrong for me to let the child study and improve?" "It's not wrong for you to let your child improve his studies, but your answer and the child's question are completely wrong. If you do this, the child will not know why. Does he have to answer the question in the imperial examination like this?" Mrs. Fang's face turned red. She didn't feel that she was answering the wrong question, but her husband is the Prince Shaofu, who is very knowledgeable. He said that the answer did not match the question, so of course it did not match. She said anxiously, "I really will affecting children? If you don't say it earlier, I won't be talking nonsense if I knew it earlier." Fang Ziwen waved his hand and said, "Okay, I'll take care of this matter, don't worry about it." He took his younger son's hand back to the study, showed him the homework he had put away, stroked his head and said, "If you have time, you can follow the steward to our family's farm and ask about the harvest of the crops. Maybe you can get something." The youngest son bowed his head and complied dejectedly. At this time, Xiaobao and Xiao Xiang rolled happily on the bed a few times, shouting, "We are finally free." Li Jinghua had just stepped into the threshold when she heard this excited shout. She came in with raised eyebrows, tapped the foreheads of the two children and said, "Let the master know that you are on vacation, but you are rolling on the bed, see if they are still the same, I agree to give you a vacation." Xiaobao immediately rolled into the arms of the Queen Mother, and said coquettishly, "Queen Mother, you can't tell the gentleman that I am just happy, so I just got carried away for a while, and we are going to do homework in a while." Little Xiang got up and nodded again and again, "Mister has assigned us a lot of homework." Fearing that Li Jinghua wouldn't believe it, Xiao Xiang jumped out of bed and showed her the homework, and said dejectedly, "The homework last night took at least 1 day, and half of our 2-day vacation was gone in one go." Xiao Bao also nodded with empathy, "So Queen Mother, we are not free at all, we were just shouting randomly just now." Li Jinghua was amused by them, "Okay, I'm scaring you, little bear, pack up quickly, your father will pick you up from the palace in a while. Bao today you will follow your fourth uncle to live with your younger brother, will you tomorrow, do you want to go to Zhuangzi? It's more convenient to go from your brother's house." Xiao Bao cheered, and asked the maid to pack up his books and homework, while whispering to Xiao Xiang, "We will leave early tomorrow, and we can go to the village to hunt hares." The Reborn Wife is Farming. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 872. After Mu Yangling packed the 5 children and sent them to the carriage, Xiao Xia, who was a little worried and sad at first, couldn't help crying and laughing, "You don't want to see these children so much. They're too noisy. They almost demolished the palace in the past 2 days. It's good to send them to Zhuangzi. Let them restrain their temper and think it's fun to leave us." Xiao Xia worried, "I'm afraid they will be even more lawless without adults around." The emperor agreed to change the school time, and the children made a lot of noise to celebrate these few days. The little bear is fine because he has to go to the palace to study, but the 3 little ones shouted "ah" in the yard every day when they opened their eyes, and took out their pocket money to buy a lot of delicious food in the kitchen. A picnic was set up in the yard. It's okay if they are busy by themselves, but they still drag them to play the game of buying and selling, insisting that they pretend to be customers to buy their food, which makes them exhausted. It's still like this at home with them suppressing, but in the Zhuangzi, if they don't watch, I don't know what will happen. Mu Yangling was not worried at all, and said, "Don't worry, I let Zuliang go with them. If they go out of line, Zuliang will definitely suppress them, otherwise they will transfer all the servants around them, and they will make a fuss I can't get up." The three children were excited to be able to leave the adults completely. The little lion clenched his fists with sparkling eyes. "We have finally escaped from the wolf's den." Xiaoan and Hutu nodded again and again, feeling that the world has opened up a bit, and the blue sky and white clouds have become bluer and whiter. As soon as they arrived at Zhuangzi on the outskirts of Beijing, they rushed in like the wind, and then went to the pond to catch loaches with a few children in Zhuangzi. Although Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang wanted to go too, they still held back and consciously went to see it first. After learning about the situation in the school, I went to the granary, asked them about their harvest this year, and recorded them one by one. They promised the emperor to make a comparison table of this year's and last year's grain harvests. If they can't finish it, it will be difficult to come to Zhuangzi next time. Of course, this comparison is limited to this Zhuangzi, and more comparisons between the two children are helpless. And Qi Xiaoyuan's move was just to let them know about it, and he didn't expect to get any data from them. When the two children asked all the farmers and filled in the data, the sky darkened, and the three children were brought to them covered in mud. Xiaobao opened his mouth wide to see the three clay children standing in front of him, and was speechless for a while. Little Xiang put down his things as usual, waved his big hand and said to the servants, "Go and boil water for them to bathe. They can get covered in mud when they are at home, let alone in Zhuangzi." Wiping his face with the tiger's head, he asked with the tiger's head, "Brother, where's mother?" Little Xiang wrinkled his nose and said, "Why did you forget that mother is at home and didn't come to Zhuangzi with us?" The three children turned their heads to look at the dark outside together. It seemed that a hole opened in the night waiting for them to go in. At this time, they realized that there was no mother and no adult company tonight. Disappeared, the three of them panicked. Xiaoan said with tears in her eyes, "I want to go home and find my mother." The little lion and the tiger head are also clamoring for their mother. Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang hurriedly hugged them and coaxed them, "Big brothers are with you, we will take you back at dawn tomorrow." The three children were unwilling and began to howl. They only knew that they wanted their parents to accompany them. How could they listen to others? The tiger head simply got out of the cub's creaking den, and ran out crying, yelling to go home. The little bear was sweating profusely, grabbed this and ran away. When he was at a loss what to do, he heard a voice, "Tisk tisk, are you also taking care of children?" Little Xiang looked up and saw his father coming in with a whip, his mouth deflated, and he shouted aggrievedly, "Father!" Chi Heiran picked up the tiger head who came running to the yard and hugged it into his arms, not caring about the dirt on his body at all, wiped the tears from the little bear's face with his big hand, and said with a straight face, "How old are you? You are in front of the younger brothers. What does crying look like? Put away your tears for me. Okay, you guys pack up and get on the carriage quickly, the city gate will be closed if you don't leave." Chi Heiran hugged the three little ones and put them on the carriage, and Zuliang hurriedly directed his servants to everything was loaded into the carriage. Only Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang stood in the yard with their mouths pouting. "Why don't you leave?" Chi Heiran turned around and stared at them. Little Bear pouted and said, "We haven't played anything today." Chi Heiran curled his lips and said, "What's so interesting about such a small village? Let's go back first, and tomorrow I'll take you to the West Lake for a picnic, and when the time comes, we'll row 2 big boats and we'll live on board." Xiaobao's eyes lit up, and he asked, "Can I go too?" "Certainly." Xiaobao cheered, and pulled the bear into the carriage. Chi Heiran also abandoned his horse and rode in the carriage, and several children nestled beside him. The mud on the 3 bodies of Hutu was all over his clothes. Chi Heiran didn't mind, thinking that it was already dirty anyway, so he simply let the 3 children sit on him. The little bear asked, "Father, did you come to pick us up on purpose?" "Yes, Chi Heiran replied casually, thinking about how to explain it to Aling after returning. Knowing how many children were going to live in Zhuangzi, Chi Heiran was a little worried. They had all returned to the gate of the city, but thinking of the twins leaving their parents for the first time, he couldn't help but ride over to have a look. Who knew that just after entering Zhuangzi, they could hear the thunderous cries of the tiger head and the little lion. He almost didn't feel sorry for him, so he took him back into the carriage without even thinking about it. He felt a little regretful. He should have stayed in the village with the children for the night, and then asked the guards to go back and inform Aling. Up. Why do you need to hurry home? Aling said that he was grinding the tempers of the children, and he didn't know if she was angry or not when he took her back. Chi Heiran was in a state of anxiety, who knew that Mu Yangling came to pick them up as soon as the car entered the gate, and she was not angry when she saw that the three children's faces were covered with mud. She just checked the three children up and down, left and right handed over to the nuns, take them down to take a bath quickly, they will have to eat later, and don't let them fall asleep. Chi Heiran stopped worrying immediately. He carried Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang out of the carriage, whispered to Mu Yangling's ear and said, I thought you weren't worried about the children. Mu Yangling snorted, stepped forward to hold Xiaobao and Xiaoxiang's hands, and said, Go, I'll take you to take a bath. Chi Heiran was ignored. Chi Heiran grinned and followed behind.